There's opportunity for volume plays there. But which one?
What's with this?
Marquise Brown, Rondell
School
Moore,
back.
one of Michael
I hate
Wilson or
that
Zach
school.
Pascal, maybe
I hate it.
James
I don't know.
Conner. I mean, Heath, if we're looking for running backs that haven't
Same
really
with,
stepped on, I just named some of them.
Middle Belt
the running backs
Road.
who haven't stepped on a landmine,
Yeah,
or
at
perhaps
least don't
even had
take
their
Middle
value
Belt.
enhanced.
Take
during
Telegraph.
the last month. I think that Pierce is the headliner, but James Cook and Khalil Herbert are right behind him. And then, I mean, James Conner at least hasn't had any. James Conner could be okay. He could catch 3, 4, 5 balls a
We did a
game.
pretty good
But
time.
now when you add in Ertz and you
We
have
did.
Trey McBride, now we're
5:30.
talking about 5 viable
It's not
targets
6
when you
o'clock,
add in
that's
3
good.
wide receivers.
So that's
It's going
good.
to be
Pretty good.
one of the least productive passing games in the league. I don't know how we're going to project this week to week, and I know that we don't want to have any piece of it in our drafts.
Do you think that either Hall or McBride are good buys for teams that maybe are kind of on that, I'm not sure if I'm competing this year, but I expect them to be a lot better in 2024?
Yeah, I think that absolutely you take advantage. So emotion is a big part of fantasy football, and it should be. Embrace emotion. I know that I just said we need to be dehumanizing with the just numbers, but we have to factor in what the emotions are rippling through the fantasy football hive mind. And I do think in this moment, if you like Brees Hall,
is.
you like
The
even
school's
Ramondre
back.
Stevenson, although as he said,
Yep.
beware
Damn
of Bill
it.
Belichick running backs holding value year over
that
year.
school.
I
You
know.
like a Trey McBride.
I hate it.
In general, when a young player on the upslope side of their career arc gets hurt,
I just
especially if they
hate
get hurt in a season-ending kind of way, that's the time to
Yeah,
swoop
at
in.
least
and
don't take Middle
blood
Belt to
is in
the
the
office.
streets.
Take
When
Telegraph.
the team that they're on, that fantasy player is in distress, that's when you want to swoop in. So I think that's a good point, that you want to go counter to the prevalent emotion in the room. That's when you can often get the best values.
So we got J.K. Dobbins back off the pup. Hopefully he's going to give us some hope this year for Brees Hall in 2024. Dobbins looked good at the end of last year. I would expect a pretty strong showing from him this year. He's still young enough that he could be a 3 to 4 year window back, and I still think as a rusher, now it'd be interesting to see if Todd Monken gets him more involved in the passing game. That's been what's missing in PPR leagues. But as a rusher, I think he's just about as good as anyone, and I wouldn't be surprised if he has a 3 to 4 year run like Nick Chubb has had the last 3 to 4 years.
He has it in him. He definitely has it in him. And I do think that the level of talent he has makes him worth dipping your toe in the water in the 6th, 7th round. Now, again, in no scenario would I take him over Dameon Pierce. And I'm not sure, as we sit here right now, that I would take him over James Cook, just because you don't have as many questions. And the problem with J.K. Dobbins right now is how much of him being on the PUP list was a legitimate health-based reason, which is a problem, or how much of it wasn't a legitimate health-based reason, which is also a problem. And I think the exploitative running back market is going to introduce something that may skew our evaluation or our analysis, because let's put Saquon Barkley aside. I think Saquon Barkley is just a warrior, and he's not do anything but stand by his teammates, okay? Now, J.K. Dobbins, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, do we have a new angle where running backs that know they're not going to play for a team next year aren't going to give a lot to that team?
Right.
Why am I going to sacrifice my blood, sweat, and tears for you when you aren't willing to commit to me? So I think there's, and Heath, this is a massive range of outcomes, right? On one end, we remember back in the good old days of fantasy football when a contract year was, who are the players in contract years? That's who you want, right? Because they've got a lot of motivation.
Well, Josh Jacobs just did that.
Yeah, and what did he get? It's like Groundhog Day, right? He's just right back where he started. He didn't even get the 5th-year option picked up. They didn't even pick up it, which they would have saved some money, I think. So, on one hand, you have Jacobs, and at least when he does show up, Taylor paying for a little bit more money than Dobbins. Dobbins is on like a $1.4 million contract right now. If Dobbins suffers a catastrophic injury, that's his earning potential for the rest of his career gone. So I don't know how to, I really am shrugging my shoulders because I don't know. I could see human psychology is so unpredictable. On one hand, I could see these running backs saying, well, I guess I have to just ball out and hope that next year justice happens and I can get some sort of long-term security for what I've given on the field. But I also understand, and Tank Williams, and it's so great that there's so many player voices in our ecosystem now. Because Tank Williams used to play for the Titans. Immediately, whenever Barkley and Jacobs, I think Barkley showed up, and he said, well, but what's going to happen the first time he has a minor injury? Or is he going to invent a minor injury? So, again, 6th, 7th round, that's about where the break point is, strictly because of talent and the hopes that this Ravens offense, faster-paced offense, is going to be a better offense. I could see Dobbins hitting, but there are probably a running back or two on the board when he's going off the board that I like better.
And I think, like, John Bosch says this a lot in Dynasty, like, the only time to roster a running back is, like, if you get to week 6 and you're definitely a contender, then go get a couple running backs.
Right.
Because, like, it's holding a running back is just a landmine in Dynasty fantasy football right now. And there's a couple of guys like Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, probably not going anywhere. Christian McCaffrey, he's happy. He's going to be a stud as long as he's healthy. But, yeah, there's just not that many guys you can be sure about. So let's get to week 6, week 7, see who the guys are who are leading their teams. We'll go acquire them with future draft picks. We'll win the league, and we'll figure the rest out later. I think that's about we complain about how bad the tight end position is in fantasy, and it is. But the difference is there's really only like 2 or 3 guys that are good. So you're not missing out on that much. There's going to be 15 good running backs this year. It's just that it's hard to figure out with all the varying things going on. And that will be a struggle, I think, in redraft and dynasty and just about every format. Listen, we've gotten through the notes. We've got deep sleepers coming up right after this short break. Okay, Sig, so I want to start with some of the deep sleepers. And again, you said it at the top. There's a range of what deep sleeper means to somebody. I'm amazed at the number of times that I get questions about 8 and 10 team leagues. And then at the same time, if you give a sleeper for a 12-team league with 6 bench spots, everybody tells you that's not a sleeper. And so I'd ask for a little grace from everyone who's listening and acknowledging that we're going to talk about a wide range of guys for deep sleeper, because that means a different thing for a lot of different leagues. 2 quarterbacks, though, who I thought kind of popped in week 1, and I've been on one of them, Sam Howell, for most of the summer just because of his situation. I think Eric Bieniemy, while Ron Rivera says some of the players don't like his style, I think that's going to be a pretty good situation with Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin, and he looked pretty good in his first action. And then a guy I haven't talked about at all, Malik Cunningham, kind of comes out of nowhere for the Patriots and looks like the new Taysom Hill. What did you think of Howell and Cunningham in week 1, and what do you think of their prospects this year?
Howell looks so good. I mean, good in the sense that he's probably one of the 32 best quarterbacks. He probably deserves to start. And if you look at his fantasy rushing stats, or rushing stats as applicable in fantasy in college, there's something there. There's, especially in Superflex. He's playing Superflex in 2 quarterback leagues. It makes fantasy football much more interesting. Yeah. So I think there's something there. Now, the other thing we have to be aware of, I'm going to try to mention offensive line plays as often as I can here, because offensive line's rough. Oof, it's rough. It is rough. So we could see Sam Howell as a player who has some potential to level off, at least, again, in that top 32 quarterback where he deserves to start, higher than Taylor Heineke, higher than Case Keenum, who had that one good year for Minnesota. But we might not know it yet because of the offensive line. But I think that there's a potential waiver wire pickup to cover a bye week or an injury if the offensive line comes together a little bit. Like you said, we want to see what the fruits of Eric Bieniemy's labor are. Love that he's bringing there. I think that it's worth monitoring, and he looks like he belongs. Malik Cunningham is really interesting. Malik Cunningham is interesting first because this is the organization that developed Julian Edelman, right? So they're open to things. They're open to players fitting in a different way than they did in college. And Malik Cunningham's been getting a lot of reps as a wide receiver, but when he came in as a quarterback, he looked like, again, it wasn't too big. Now, yeah, it's the end of the preseason game. I get it.
You were so scared.
But it's not, you don't have to stretch your mind that wide to think if this team is 4-7 and Mac Jones looks like the way that Mac Jones has looked, and Bailey Zappi is still Bailey Zappi, when do you start thinking, this again, 2 quarterback superflex leagues, you have to be a step ahead of everybody when it comes to finding that quarterback. And I guess the Malik Cunningham topic, I want to emphasize to folks that during the offseason, we spend so much time staring at depth charts. We spend so much time thinking about it that it feels static.
Yeah.
Right? It feels like everything is pretty much set and there's a narrow range of outcomes, and we're just trying to figure out where in that narrow range of outcomes. The reality is that it's more like in these wild inflection points where everything goes like incremental change, incremental change, and then poof, big swing, and it's over. And if you were on the wrong side of that swing, you just got clobbered. If you're on the right side of that swing, you're soaring. And Dynasty, as one of our topics, overarching topics here, we could be saying, well, there's no way Malik Cunningham's going to be the quarterback of the future for the Patriots. And then in the matter of like 1 week, where Mac Jones throws 3 interceptions in the first half, and the Patriots are down 21-0 at the half, and they're already basically out of playoff potential. They say, well, let's see what Cunningham can do. And Cunningham lights it up in the second half. And now all of a sudden, Malik Cunningham is the quarterback, at least of the present, right? So I think just the promise he showed, and that this is an open-minded organization. And remember another thing, there was a lot of chatter of a rift, fracture between Mac Jones and Belichick, right? And there's some talk that the ownership is forcing Mac Jones on Belichick. Now, who knows if any of this stuff is true? That we're even hearing this because it's the Patriots. Here's the one rule. Here's how you fit in the Patriot organization. Don't talk to anybody about anything, right? Don't say anything. So just that we've even heard, ooh, there was some friction. Ooh, they didn't like what Mac Jones was doing with an outside quarterback coach or whatever. Just that we're hearing that, there's some fire to that smoke. So I think we have to be open-minded to the possibilities here because Malik Cunningham is doing what we hope, what we wish for all these players. Because the NFL, one of the beautiful things about the NFL is it is still one of the last outposts of the American dream. Where whatever odds you're facing, whatever everybody has said about you, if you go out and you prove you can do it, then that's all behind you. And look at Austin Eckler, right? Look at some of these players that had no expectations coming in. Adam Thielen was a local tryout. Teams get to bring in as many players as they want from their local market. There are players who had no expectations. James Harrison almost made the Hall of Fame this year. He got in the Hall of Fame. He was cut 4 times, So yeah, let's be open to Malik Cunningham. Let's be open to lots of things that we say that's never going to happen. Guess what? Every year, lots of never happen things happen.
Speaking of the long odds, we're going to talk about the short players. Deuce Vaughn and Tank Dell, 2 of my favorite guys in rookie drafts this season. You get to that round 3, round 4 range, I just could not stop gobbling these guys up. And fantastic performances in their preseason debuts. And the response that I get on Twitter, I share the highlights, I talk them up, and of course the response is he's too small. He's 5'8", he's 160 pounds, he's 5'5", and I just kind of feel like both these guys have already been penalized for that. If Deuce Vaughn was 215 pounds, he would have been a first-round pick by the way that guy moves. He's already been penalized for that. We've already seen Tank Dell penalized for that. The way he produced at Houston, the way he gets open, if he was 6 foot tall and 190 pounds, he would have been picked in the first round. So we don't need to penalize them a second time because of their size. Are you excited about either of these guys in terms of long-term potential? And I guess which one of them are you more excited about?
I think long-term potential, probably Dell. But I think you're right to point out that players with low BMIs, players that are shorter than you need to be, thresholds are important. When I first started going out on the road to the college all-star games and being part of the draft scene, I remember one of the things that I learned was there's thresholds. Some of these they're still holding, right? Like a tackle needs to have 34-inch arms, quarterbacks 9.5-inch hands, and all these different things, right? And I think that these players were outside of the previous thresholds. But I also think the game has changed. You have more college concepts in offenses. They're spreading the field more. I like to say every team needs to have a player that can force the defense to honor the jet sweep, right? So there's a lot more room. Tutu Atwell is a player who's coming on. And obviously McVay took him in the second round. So McVay thought, hey, these players that most people would just put a line through and say too small for the NFL. Now, Dell is especially interesting. I'm going to bring in stories, of course, again, because he and C.J. Stroud are buddies. Right. From the draft scene, and the word is that Stroud asked for them to take Dell. That matters. Look, when the bullets are flying out there,